I'm introducing Nancy Crumbine tonight. She's a poet and associate visiting professor of writing and rhetoric at Dartmouth College. She holds a PhD in philosophy and 2 master's degrees in philosophy and religion. She has lectured widely under the auspices of the New Hampshire and Vermont Humanities Councils, the National Council for the Aging, the National Endowment for the Humanities, and religious and education conferences both in the U.S. and the United Kingdom. She also spoke here last year on Annie Dillard and Emily Dickinson as part of her previous First Wednesday series. In addition to her published academic articles, she's author of Humility, Anger, and Grace, Meditations Towards a Life That Matters, and she'll also be selling that and signing copies after her talk tonight.
Spencer. Thank you to Wendy and Dottie, is it? Yes. And Tracy and Allison and the video people and everybody, and Brownell Library. You know, you do something that none of the other libraries do, and I've spoken to, in front of almost all of them in the First Wednesday series, as you put your talks on YouTube. Have you noticed? Yes, all your talks, all your previous First Wednesday talks are on YouTube, which is wonderful because a lot of my friends have said, oh, I watched your lecture that you gave last year at Brownell Library on YouTube. So, and I myself watched it this morning. Part of it, it's really hard to watch yourself for very long, but anyway, thanks to Brownell for doing that. It's a really wonderful community service and to have that available. And I want to also thank Allie White, who organizes all of this tirelessly and with infinite details that she has to attend to. And she just does it with such grace and humor. And I have yet to meet her, and I've been working for her for 4 years now, I think. The first talk I gave for Vermont Humanities was in Montpelier for this First Wednesday series. I've been doing things for Vermont Humanities Councils for years, but the first Wednesday series was in Montpelier, and I did, in one talk, if you can believe it, 4 poets, Kabir, Dickinson, Jane Kenyon, and Rumi. Well, you're shaking your head. It wasn't that bad. The room was packed, as word has gotten out that to the Unitarians that I was coming. I'm also a Unitarian Universalist minister. The energy was very high, the room was packed, but the highlight of the evening was a woman in the front row, and every time I mentioned Rumi's name, she leapt up out of her seat, raised her hands, and said, yes! I kid you not. So I look forward to similar enthusiasm here in the northern part of the state. So we're going to spend a night with Rumi, spend a night reading. And I have to start with the fact that we are, yes, I got energy from back there. I have to start with the fact that we are not reading Rumi in the original. We are reading Rumi in translation by Coleman Barks. It's very important to understand this because it takes 2 people to translate a poem. It takes somebody who knows the 2 languages backwards and forwards, a real linguist. And that is John, his name I can never remember because it's never on any of these books. It'll come to me in a minute. The literal translator, and then a poet. So Coleman Barks actually doesn't know Farsi. He relies on this translator, and they work together to come up with the final poetry. But just so you know, it's very complicated, and it's quite a we're looking at quite a different body of work than the original Farsi. And I have no way to judge that since I don't know Farsi. But knowing that Coleman Barks doesn't know either made me feel a little better. Rumi is the best-selling poet in the United States. That's astounding. And of course, it's because of Coleman Barks. And I want to tell you that it's also because of Vermont, because the first book of translated Rumi was this book published in Putney, Vermont. Yeah. This is tipping. Is there any way to... All right, I'll just have to try to ignore it. If there's a wedge or something.
Yeah, it's just the top that's tipping.
Yeah, okay. Coleman Barks began this journey, which has now been a journey of a lifetime of translation, because Robert Bly handed him an English translation of Rumi, but it was Victorian English, very stiff, and said to him these now famous words. This is Robert Bly handing Rumi to Coleman Barks. These poems need to be released from their cages. So, a word about poetry in general. How many of you like poetry? How many of you really don't like poetry? You were just sort of dragged here by your spouse. Yeah, there you go. Oh, a member of the board of the library is admitting this. Okay, so it's really hard. You know, poetry's so difficult. Why bother? I came to poetry late. I actually told this story last year, but since a few of you were here last year, I'll retell it because I like telling it in hopes that it will inspire others. I was always afraid of poetry because I was taught it in the traditional way, which is the instructor had the true meaning, and we came to class and were shamed because we didn't understand it in all the complexity that the professor understood it. I'm teaching it the opposite way now. I use poetry in all my writing classes, and the students bring the poems themselves. They pick the poems. They lead the interpretation. I might throw in something that they miss, but the class figures it out together. There's no right answer. Very, very important. But I was still afraid of poetry really late in life. I won't tell you how old I was before I had this epiphany, thanks to a colleague of mine. I finally confessed to a member of the English department that I really didn't understand Emily Dickinson. This is a really huge confession. I probably had a beer or two. And she said, and she was an expert on Emily Dickinson. This is Ivy Schweitzer, wonderful professor at Dartmouth. She turned to me, she goes, Nancy, nobody understands Emily Dickinson. Which was a big a revelation to me that the plates moved underneath my feet. And that meant that I could read any poetry. I didn't have to understand it. And so I've been reading it and writing it ever since, not understanding very much, but enjoying it all very much. The poet writes because, as Ed Hirsch writes in his wonderful book, How to Read a Poem, quote, the spiritual life wants articulation. The spiritual life wants articulation. We read poems because poems are meant to pierce our soul, to wake us up. And who among us, at least us, does not want to wake up? If you've come to hear a talk on Rumi, you must be longing to wake up. Tonight, I'd like to read Rumi together. Not read it to you, but read together. Not study him academically, that seems so ridiculous. Not study him as a historical figure, but read him together. I'm going to speak a little bit, give you a little bit of biography, very short intro, and then and read some of his poems, but then I'm going to pass out some of his poems, and we're going to read them together and discuss them. Ed Hirsch, again, in this wonderful book, How to Read a Poem, and if you're at all interested, I think I have that on my bibliography. There are, by the way, there's a bibliography here to hand out, and a Rumi calendar, beautiful illustrations for you to look at afterwards. So Ed Hirsch again, you are reading poetry, I mean really reading it, when you feel encountered and changed by a poem, when you feel its seismic vibrations, the sounding of your depths. And Rumi is a perfect example of a poet who's really wanting to do that. He's out to change you. Rilke writes, there is no place that does not see you. You must change your life. There is no place that does not see you. He's referring to poetry. There is no place in the poem that does not see you. You must change your life. The didactic nature of poetry, all poetry, Rumi in particular. But poetry, I hear someone in the back row say, but poetry, just the time it takes to write a poem, never mind the time it takes to understand it, is surely madness. To which Dickinson, of course, responds, much madness is divinest sense. And Rumi answers, I have lived on the lip of insanity, wanting to know reasons, knocking on the door. It opens. I've been knocking from the inside. We could spend all night on that poem. I've lived on the lip of insanity, wanting to know reasons, knocking on a door. It opens. I've been knocking from the inside. A word now about the word God. A word Coleman Barks uses in his translation of Rumi. I just heard on the radio a few weeks ago that 50% of Vermonters don't believe in God. I also found out recently that we were an independent nation for 14 years. Does everybody in this room know that? Why didn't I know that until recently? 1777 to 1791. Anyway, half of us don't believe in God. So the word God is problematic, and I don't want it to get in the way of 50% of the audience as I'm reading these poems. So put anything you want in there as substitute. It's a translation of a term that's impossible to translate, and of course none of us know what the word means anyway. Needless to say, and of course the word's been so poorly used in our day. So put anything you want in there: nature, universe, energy, being, love. Some longing persists, yet some longing persists, some ancient memory of love. So as we read together, I invite you to translate the word God however you want. And finally, why have I invited you to climb into the boat of reading Rumi? Entering into this terrible rowing toward God. Rowing, as it happens, as in one of those power pools designed to fit in your basement, where you swim and swim, but stay in the same place. These past few years, I've been speaking about the language of spirituality throughout the state, through this wonderful program of the Vermont Humanities Council. First Wednesdays. Rumi, Kabir, who's a 15th century Hindu, Emily Dickinson, Jane Kenyon, and Annie Dillard. And last year, as I mentioned to some of you, I spoke, or as Wendy said, I spoke on Annie Dillard and Emily Dickinson, a really nice combination. I call what I have been talking about this language of spirituality. By this I mean not the language of myth or ritual, nothing to do with organized religion, but the language of the spirit, the language of particular individuals who have devoted their lives to the refinement of metaphor to its purest sense, to its finest lens, focused on what is invisible, found words, to quote Adrienne Rich, quote, found words in the country where there is no language. Writing always, quote, into the unutterable country of the spirit. Writing of the soul, the inner life of those who have paid attention. So much attention, these poets waken us up. So that even the third person of the Trinity, metaphorically speaking, the third presence in the room where there are only two people, that third presence, what poets call the stranger, the energy that keeps trying to get our attention like a bat cornered, the one whom we so often keep trying to ignore, the guest, so that that third presence can arrive and begin to be seen. I invite us into an evening with Rumi because this poetry will change us if we let it. And because his subject, divinity, divine light, God, ecstasy, union, love, you choose what word works for you, his subject is everywhere around us, everywhere beyond language, beyond the language to which we have become ever more addicted, everywhere without and within. Beyond language and beyond religious expressions, it is from the earth and turns our attention always to its ever-renewing source. Beyond judgment, where things melt into spirit, and heaven is found not in the longing for the afterlife, but in the here and now, in this bird, on this branch, in this simple space, here in this small town, found in what Donald Hall calls the luminous particular. So with that introduction, I'm going to give you a little background on Rumi, and then we'll some comments on the poems, and then we'll dig into digging into the poems. Jalaluddin Bakhi Rumi, 1207 to 1273. Sufi mystic, founder of the ecstatic dancing order of the whirling dervishes. Born in Persia, what is now Afghanistan, Bakhi, Afghanistan, at a young age, his family, a family of scholars and theologians and jurists, moved to Konya, Turkey, where he is buried and where his shrine exists. His father was a preacher, elder, spiritual guide, died in 1231. In 1244, Rumi met the wandering dervish Shamsi, Shams, as he calls it. So he was a wild man that came out of the woods, not unlike John the Baptist, one sometimes imagines, maybe. He comes out, he's a seeker, a spiritual seeker, and Rumi's whole life changes. He feels that this man embodies the divine. He falls deeply in love with him. And this intense relationship, spiritual relationship, forms. Lasts only about a year and a half because Shams disappears. And this was at the time when Rumi was head of this whirling dervish group. He had his own followers at that point. Followers were very, very jealous of this intense relationship. There's some traditions say that his students killed him. We'll never know what happened. Rumi, but out of this intense relationship and out of his mourning and intense loss of this friend, this lover, came the fire of much of his poetry. He never wrote a word down, and then I asked myself, what other famous people never wrote a word down? Anybody? Jesus? Who else? Jesus, who else? Homer, Socrates? Yeah. Oh, very good, very good. All right.
Buddha.
What?
The Buddha.
Yeah, Buddha. Exactly. He composed these poems as he was whirling, dancing, a moving meditation, and as he was dancing, and his disciples wrote it all down. There's something like 4,000 plus poems. Coleman Barks is begging people to take up the joy of translating because he knows he's not going to get to them all, although goodness knows he's still trying. The important thing that I already have mentioned, I want to underline, is that that is important to me, and I hope to you, is that the belief in Sufi, the Sufis believe that it is possible to draw closer to God, to the divine, to more fully embrace the divine in this life. It's a very much of a contrast to Orthodox Christianity that puts meaning into the next life. It's this life where divinity can be reached. The goal is to abandon all dualisms, and this is so instructive for Western culture. We're so dualistic. We very much live in the future of the next life, culturally speaking. We're very alienated from the earth. And this has come, of course, now to a terrible crisis. I don't have to tell people in this room about that. Rumi is very instructive for us today. It's no wonder that he's selling so well, because he brings a fresh vision, the very vision that I personally think the West very much needs to hear, of the holiness of things, the holiness of the earth, of the animals. Coleman Barks says that the Sufis read animals like scripture, studied them, loved them, took notes on them, learned from their behaviors, and especially dogs, and we're going to get to some dog poems. Love dogs, yeah. All poets seem to love dogs. You know, Emily Dickinson's famous. Well, I'm going to get to that later. Okay. Beginning a spiritual journey by one begins in Sufi tradition by finding a teacher, and the transmission of the divine light is from the teacher's heart to the heart of the student. It's heart to heart, rather than the worldly knowledge transmitted from mouth to ear. Coleman Barks, who, as I said, has given Rumi to the English-speaking world, writes of Rumi's work, quote, an ecstasy melting the confinement of the ego into a larger, elastic, cross-pollinating dance of selves. Rumi's poems are a personal record of one, quote, being given a sharp, clear consciousness of the divine and enduring it. I once said to some students, I wish God would just come and tell me what to do. And they said, you've got to be kidding. It was terrifying, the thought, right? And of course it is. I mean, you don't really want God come face to face. He'll wrestle you to the ground like Jacob. Or tell you to go to Egypt, where there's a death warrant out for your arrest. Hirsch on form in Rumi. Hirsch comments on Rumi's poems that it's a feeling of surprise, a boundless surprise. Each stanza is an independent unit. Each has its own subject matter. Rapidly shifting landscapes, meanings accrue through association, and wonderful sense of humor. For example, say yes quickly. This is Rumi now. Say yes quickly. The spiritual window shoppers I have lived, say yes quickly. The spiritual window shoppers I have lived on the tip of insanity. I'm sorry, these are references to poems that we'll read later. You'll see the humor as we go along. Okay. So let's look at a few of these poems. No, that's going to wait till later. Thanks. I'm just going to sort of highlight a few characteristics of the poems and reading a few poems, and then we're going to read together. The first thing I want to say about Rumi's poems is that they are, and I've referenced this already, that they're embedded in things. The spirit is always embedded. It's not something abstract that hovers over the oceans. It's in things. One line, God's joy moves from unmarked box to unmarked box, from cell to cell, as rainwater down into flower bed, as roses up from ground. Now it looks like a plate of rice and fish. Now a cliff covered with vines. Now a horse being saddled. These are all images of God's joy. And you see, you don't have to be afraid of poetry. Rumi's very accessible, as Coleman Barks has translated. God's joy, it hides within these, till one day it cracks them open. You see how sort of ordinary this poem's going along, listing these things? God's joy moves from unmarked box to unmarked box, from cell to cell, as rainwater down into flower bed, as roses up from ground. Now it looks like a plate of rice and fish. Now a cliff covered with vines. Now a horse being saddled. It hides within these till one day it cracks them open. And there's that killer last line, right? What does that mean? That God's joy cracks them open. Cracks them open. To us? To themselves? Let me read you another poem. Don't grieve. Notice how didactic he is. Every single poem is very didactic. Don't grieve. Anything you lose comes round in another form. The child weaned from mother's milk now drinks wine and honey mixed. God's joy moves from unmarked box to unmarked box, from cell to cell, as rainwater down into flower bed, as roses up from ground. Now it looks like a plate of rice and fish, now a cliff covered with vines, now a horse being saddled. It hides within these till one day it cracks them open. Part of the self leaves the body when we sleep and changes shape. You might say, last night I was a cypress tree, a small bed of tulips, a field of grapevines. Then the phantasm goes away. You're back in the room. I don't want to make anyone fearful. Here's what's behind what I say. See how conversational these poems are? Ta-dum, dum, ta-dum, ta-ta-dum. That's the light gold of wheat in the sun, and the gold of bread made from that wheat. I have neither. I'm only talking about them. As a town in the desert looks up at stars on a clear night. He is opposed to religious orthodoxy. Coleman Barks says he really doesn't belong in any tradition, although, of course, he's from the Sufi Muslim tradition. But at his funeral, every world religion was represented, and he's quite clearly not you couldn't fit him into any orthodox box whatsoever. I have these all numbered here just to read you these poems. I'm going to wait on that one. Okay. Is a quote from a poem. These spiritual window shoppers who idly ask, how much is that? Oh, I'm just looking. And we'll read this later, but let me, we'll read the whole poem together later, but let me preface it. Here we are. These spiritual window shoppers who idly ask, how much is that? Oh, I'm just looking. They handle 100 items and put them down, shadows with no capital. What is spent is love, and 2 eyes wet with weeping. But these walk into a shop, and their whole lives pass suddenly in that moment, in that shop. Where did you go? Nowhere. What did you have to eat? Nothing much. And then he turns didactic. Even if you don't know what you want, buy something. To be part of the exchanging flow. To be part of the exchanging flow. Start a huge, foolish project like Noah. It makes absolutely no difference what people think of you. That can't be part of the flow, be part of the energy flow. Spirituality is a conversation for Rumi. It's not something you do alone. It's not. Whitehead says all religion begins in solitude. Well, that might be true, but spiritual quest, spiritual hunger is in community. It's in conversation. And yet, what we're trying to find in conversation is that land beyond words. We're trying to get to silence through our words. It's a lot of paradox in spiritual language. And Rumi has is probably one of the better able to express it. And one of the paradoxes, of course, is that being and nothingness are two sides of the same coin, as many philosophers have since pointed out. Praise to the emptiness that blanks out existence. Existence, this place made from our love for that emptiness. Praise to the emptiness that blanks out our existence, existence, this place made from our love for that emptiness. Hard to follow, isn't it? Yet somehow comes emptiness, this existence goes. Praise to that happening over and over. Praise to emptiness. This is a very, very important Sufi insight, or really Eastern insight. For years, I'm going to keep reading. That was the first stanza. For years I pulled my own existence out of emptiness. Then one swoop, one swing of the arm, that work is over. Free of who I was, free of presence, free of dangerous fear, hope, free of mountainous wanting. Free of mountainous wanting. T.S. Eliot. Hope. Wait without hope, for hope would be hope for the wrong thing. The here and now mountain is a tiny piece of straw blown into emptiness. The here and now mountain is a tiny piece of straw blown off into emptiness. These words I'm saying so much begin to lose meaning. Existence, emptiness, mountain, straw. Words and what they try to say swept out the window, down the slant of the roof. So if you're confused, you're supposed to be. So just rest with this. Don't panic. Okay. Drunkenness is a major metaphor in Rumi's poems, as it is in Emily Dickinson's poems, as it is in Kabir as well. Dickinson, you know the poem, I taste a liquor never brewed, from tankards scooped in pearl. Not all the Frankfurt berries yield such an alcohol. And of course, she's talking about spiritual ecstasy, mystical ecstasy. Inebriate of air am I, and debauchee of dew, reeling through endless summer days from inns of molten blue. So what nature is her liquor, you know. Rumi, this drunkenness began in some other tavern. There's a notion, understanding in Rumi that there's a pre-existence of the soul. We came from somewhere else, and we're going to return somewhere else. We don't know what that someplace else is, but it's ecstatic. It's good. It's a good thing to be going back. This drunkenness began in some other tavern. When I get back around to that place, that tavern, that pre-existence, I'll be completely sober. And then he says, who says this? Who says words with my mouth? He very much saw himself as a channeler of words coming from somewhere else. So let me give you a few inebriated poems. This is the longer poem of the line I just quoted. Who says words with my mouth? All day I think about it, then at night I say it. Where did I come from, and what am I supposed to be doing? Do you all think about that at night, every night you go to bed? Where did I come from, and what am I supposed to be doing? I have no idea, Rumi says. My soul is from elsewhere, I'm sure of that, and I intend to end up there. This drunkenness began in some other tavern. And again, drunkenness is a mystical ecstasy that he's talking about, and wine always refers to that divinity. This drunkenness began in some other tavern. When I get back around to that place, I'll be completely sober. Meanwhile, I'm like a bird from another continent, sitting in this aviary. The day is coming when I fly off, but who is it now in my ear? Who hears my voice? Who says words with my mouth? Who looks out with my eyes? What is my soul? I cannot stop asking. If I could taste one sip of an answer, I could break out of this prison for drunks. I didn't come here of my own accord, and I can't leave that way. Whoever brought me here will have to take me back. This poetry, I never know what I'm going to say. I don't plan it. When I'm outside the saying of it, I get very quiet and rarely speak at all. It's the old rule that drunks have to argue and get into fights. The lover is just as bad. He falls into a hole. But down in that hole, he finds something shining, worth more than any amount of money or power. Last night, the moon came dropping its clothes in the street. I took it as a sign to start singing, falling up into the bowl of sky. The bowl breaks. Everywhere is falling everywhere. Nothing else to do. Here's the new rule. Break the wine glass and fall toward the glass blower's breath. I'll read that again. You can understand this. I mean, of course, nobody can understand this, but just trust yourself. Try. I mean, I don't get it yet, but I'm just on the edge. It's the old rule that drunks have to argue and get into fights. The lover is just as bad. He falls into a hole. But down in that hole, he finds something shining, worth more than any amount of money or power. And if you doubt the truth of this, go find yourself a recovered alcoholic. They're the shiniest people I know, some of the wisest people I know, are recovered alcoholics. Second stanza. Last night the moon came dropping its clothes in the street. I took it as a sign to start singing. Falling up into the bowl of sky, the bowl breaks. Everywhere is falling everywhere, nothing else to do. Here's the new rule. Break the wine glass and fall toward the glass blower's breath. I see a few more smiles. All right, let that just be there. It's just heresy to try to explain Rumi, even if I could, which I can't. One more poem in this vein, The Drunk and the Madman. I'm lost in your face, in your lost eyes. The drunk and the madman inside me take a liking to each other. They sit down on the ground together. Look at this mess of a life as the sun looks fondly into ruins. With one glance, many trees grow from a single seed. It's a lovely line. With one glance, many trees grow from a single seed. Your two eyes are like a Turk born in Persia. He's on a rampage, a Persia shooting Turkish arrows. He has ransacked my house so that no one lives here anymore. Just a boy running barefooted all through it. Your face is a garden, and the your you could take as Shams, as God, as divinity. Your face is a garden that comes up where the house was. With our hands, we tear down houses and make bare places. The moon has no desire to be described. No one needs this poetry. The loose hair strands of a beautiful woman don't have to be combed. Another theme in Rumi is very clear, is that he welcomes the guest, the stranger. Do you all know the story of Le Chambon, a small village in France, right on the border of Switzerland? I want to tell you that story because it brings home the power of this notion of the stranger. Hebrews 13, be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares. Yeah? And there's a tradition in Judaism and Christianity to welcome the stranger. And there are many stories in the Hebrew scriptures as well as the Greek scriptures of miraculous things happening when you welcome the stranger and are not fearful. Strangers often turn into angels. Right? So, in Le Chambon, this is a real historical story. It's a small village, Protestant village, right on the border of Switzerland, under Vichy government in France. And Lyon, the head of the Vichy government, right next to, very close. They're really under the nose of the Nazis during the war. And there were Jews, of course, trying to escape and starving in the forests around this town, trying to get across the border. And one day, a Jewish mother, desperate and starving, dared to knock on the door of a farmhouse in Le Chambon. And the farm woman answered the door, and the starving Jewess said, may I have some food? And the farm woman looked at her for the long, long time and said, are you Jewish? And the Jewish woman, not knowing what to say, answered honestly and said, yes. And the farm woman ran to the back of the house and yelled for her husband. Come quickly, come quickly. There is a stranger at our door. She welcomed her in, and she fed her and her children, and so began the saving of more than 4,000 Jewish families by the entire town of Le Chambon. Became an underground railroad and getting families over to Switzerland, led by the preacher who had been preaching this story, this biblical text. Phil, if you're interested in this, Philip Halley, a philosopher whom I had the privilege of meeting at Wesleyan College when I was a freshman in college, 95 years ago, wrote 2 books on Le Chambon. He was absolutely obsessed with how this tiny little, very conservative village could have performed this incredibly courageous miracle. The whole village had to cooperate to have this, for them to accomplish this. So anyway, there's a long history of welcoming the guest. And Rumi, Kabir, a lot of these spiritual poets talk a lot about it. Dickinson as well, Jane Kenyon, of course, as well. Kabir, a friend, hope for the guest while you were alive. Hope that the guest does come. The next line, jump into experience while you are alive. What you call salvation belongs to the time before death. Rumi, totally conscious and apropos of nothing, he comes to see me. The stranger. He comes to see me. Is someone here, I ask? Let me read you that whole poem. So. Totally conscious and apropos of nothing, he comes to see me. Is someone here, I ask? And then in italics, namely, it's another voice. The moon, the full moon is inside your house. That's what the guest says. My friends and I go running out into the street. The moon. I'm in here. Comes a voice from the house, but we aren't listening. We're looking up at the sky. My pet nightingale sobs like a drunk in the garden. Ring doves scatter with small cries. Where? It's midnight. The whole neighborhood is up and out in the street thinking, the cat burglar has come back. The actual thief is there too, saying out loud, yes, the cat burglar is somewhere in this crowd. No one pays attention. Lo, I am always with you. Means when you look for God, God is in the look of your eyes. When you look for God, God is in the look of your eyes. In the thought of looking nearer to you than yourself or things that have happened to you. There's no need to go outside. Be melting snow. Wash yourself of yourself. A white flower grows in the quietness. Let your tongue become that flower. One other guest poem, and this is a very famous one. Some of you may have heard this before. This is read in Unitarian churches all the time. This being human is a guest house. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness. These are all descriptions of different guests that come, yes? A joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes with an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. This is hard stuff. Welcome shame. Greet shame at the door laughing. This is a hard suggestion. It reminds me, I went to a lecture sponsored by NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Illness. And a mother was talking about her severely bipolar young child, 10-year-old, who was just out of control. And she said that in her journey of dealing with this, she realized for a long time that she, of course, loved her son, but she hated the illness. And she finally came to realize that she had to love the illness as well. And that's something that we can almost understand. And, well, I don't know what to say about that. It was one of the most profound moments of my life when she said that. Because I realized she was absolutely right, and I wasn't anywhere near being able to do that. I think that's what Rumi's talking about in that poem. Emily Dickinson, the soul that hath a guest doth seldom go abroad. Diviner crowd at home obliterate the need. And you know she didn't entertain too many guests, so you know she's talking spiritually there. Rumi talks as a prophet, very didactic. And we'll get to a poem of that. I want to pass out these poems. So I just want to say a word about dogs. I said that he loved dogs, and I want to read you that poem of, they loved all animals, but especially dogs. Loved dogs. One night a man was crying, Allah, Allah. His lips grew sweet with the praising until a cynic said, so, I have heard you calling out, but have you ever gotten any response? The man had no answer to that. He quit praying and fell into a confused sleep. He dreamed he saw Kadir, the guide of souls, in a thick green foliage. Why did you stop praising? Because I never heard anything back. This longing you express is the return message. The grief you cry out from draws you toward union. Your pure sadness that wants help is the secret cup. Listen to the moan of a dog for its master. That whining is the connection. There are love dogs no one knows the names of. Give your life to be one of them. Listen to the moan of a dog for its master. That whining is the connection. There are love dogs no one knows the names of. Give your life to be one of them. And then just on dogs, I can't resist. Emily Dickinson, I started early, took my dog, and visited the sea. You remember that poem? Or Jane Kenyon, wonderful a poem about her dog, Gus, who I had the privilege of meeting. The dog furrows his brow while pissing long and thoughtfully against an ancient hemlock. The snow turns the saffron of a monk's robe, and acrid steam ascends. Rumi could have written that, actually. Rumi has a terrific sense of humor, and we'll see that in the poems we'll read together. And such joy and ecstasy throughout. Rumi leads us through terrible darkness, through pain and grief, to the joy of divinity, present and accessible here and now in all its humble glory.